Good evening. My name is Jude Burke. I'm with Elm Street Development. Appreciate Councilmember Esteve, Mayor Robinson, Councilmember Wolfley. I saw Delegate Valentino Smith and Senator Peters. I know Senator Peters asked for some time at the microphone. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes and go through some slides, give Senator Peters his time, and then we'll take questions and comments from the audience. So Elm Street Development, we've been developing residential mixed-use communities in the Washington and Baltimore region since 1977. I've been with the company since 2003. I also have with me tonight our attorney, Chris Hatcher of Lurch, Early and Brewer, and our traffic engineer, Dave Nelson of Street Traffic Studies. They're going to help me answer some of your questions. We invited you here tonight for an exchange of information in both directions. The reason we're at Ken Hill Center, this is an informal meeting. This is not an official step in the process. We're here to talk to the community. We want to make it clear nobody's voting on anything tonight. This isn't a council hearing. This is just for us to tell you where we are and hear your questions and comments on that. Also, if you know anybody who couldn't make it here tonight, I'll pass the slides along to the planning department. They'll be up on the website. Please feel free to call me or email me anytime. I'm happy to stop by your house or meet you someplace or talk on the phone at your convenience. So, we've made an application to Prince George's County to rezone about 155 acres that is adjacent to but not in the city limits of Bowie. The City Council will get to make a recommendation to the County Planning Board on our application, but we've put off that city hearing and we've put off the county hearings while we continue to work with stakeholders and agencies on different parts of our plan. So, as I said, the meeting tonight is not an official step in the process, but we're just here to communicate with you. We're all here to listen to your questions, comments, and get your feedback on our proposal. As I said, we're proposing to rezone about 155 acres. It's owned by the Maryland Province of Jesuits, also known as the Corporation of Roman Catholic Clergymen. So I'll refer to them as the Jesuits tonight, the province. This land is presently zoned for residential development. It's zoned for 115 houses on 1 to 2 acre lots. It can be developed with those houses under the current zoning and without annexing into the city. The land is currently zoned residential. It's zoned for 1 to 2 acre lots. About 115 houses would fit on this acreage under the present zoning, and that can be developed without annexing into the city as a matter of right. Yes. Yes, you have a say in it, and that's why we're here tonight. And I'll try to run through my slides and then take questions and comments. The Jesuits had around 2,000 acres in the 1700s and 1800s. They had tenant farmers throughout the property, and they owned slaves at White Marsh, as has been in the news lately. Besides farming, in the 1900s, some of the property was leased out for use as the Bowie City dump. Some was mined for gravel, some was leased for an asphalt batch plant, some leased for service stations, which are still operating there. As the Levitts developed Bowie, starting in the 50s, the Jesuits sold 32 acres for the city's sewage treatment plant in 1960, later sold 9 more acres to Public Works. In 1962, they sold 800 acres to the Levitt that became Whitehall, Chapel Forge, Overbrook, Yorktown, and Idlewild. In 1966, they sold Levitt 200 more acres that became Rockledge. The Levitts built over 2,200 houses in those subdivisions. In 1967, the province gave 30 acres to the Archdiocese of Washington that became Sacred Heart Parish. That's the gap, the hole in the donut essentially there, just south of Route 450. And today the province still holds title to about 800 acres in orange on the slide. The 2006 approved Bowie and Vicinity Master Plan recommended that the land we are working on be rezoned and developed in a comprehensive design zone or a mixed-use zone with, quote, diverse housing types and or a mixed or planned retirement community. Most of the rest of the Jesuit property that's left is zoned open space, and we are not seeking to change that. Plan 2035, the general plan for the entire county, designated the property for low to medium density development. That recommendation is why we want to build a residential neighborhood of about 440 single-family detached houses and townhouses. We are proposing to add about 325 units above what the land is already zoned for. The RS zone we are requesting is the second lowest density of the 4 residential comprehensive design zones, with a range of 1.6 to 3.5 units per acre. Our proposal works out to about 2.9 units per acre. We looked at a number of other uses for the property with the Jesuits, and we consulted city and county officials about what they thought would be the best use. We considered commercial uses, age-restricted housing, apartments and houses and townhouses, and considered mixes of all the above. In the end, we decided that continuing the suburban pattern and density of housing was the best fit for the site and the surrounding community. We're proposing single-family detached houses on the north side of 450 bordering Idlewild. We did that expressly to be compatible with Idlewild. Right now, we're also proposing singles on Pod A, which is to the west of Sacred Heart, and we're proposing townhouses on Pod C to the east of Sacred Heart. We have heard suggestions that that arrangement be reversed. We think both arrangements have merit, and we'll keep looking at both options, and happy to have your input on that tonight. We gave a lot of consideration to a planned retirement community on all or a portion of the property. That use is allowed under the existing zoning according to the Prince George's County Code by the special exception process. No rezoning would be required for the PRC planned retirement community. It would have to go, special exception is another process with the planning board. We discussed that with different city and county officials, the province, and the archdiocese early in our due diligence work on the property. One of the things we heard was that although Bowie had been advocating for more age-restricted housing for a while, that need was getting met on other properties such as Melford, and so there wasn't such a strong need for age-restricted at White Marsh. We're still willing to consider that use on a portion of the property, and again, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that tonight. We haven't ruled anything out. I do want to point out one thing that did change in our proposal after our very first introductory session at the County Council. At that meeting, we showed a road connection with Ivy Way. We heard a lot of feedback on that the very first night. We immediately took that off the plans, and it's not part of our proposal. If Park and Planning and the county and the city make us put it on the plans and build it, then we will have to comply. That's not up to us. When Park and Planning's transportation planner reviewed our rezoning application, he recommended the Ivy Way connection be added as a second access point for Idlewild. But we don't need that connection for the future residents on the property we're proposing, and we are not proposing that connection on our plans and in our application. This slide shows the Bowie city limits shaded in purple, and the property we're discussing is outlined in blue. We want to annex this land into the city of Bowie, reconnecting it to the former parts of White Marsh that are now within the city limits. We think this slide shows that it's a natural fit into the city, filling in a missing piece. The homeowners would pay Bowie property taxes and rely on Bowie services such as water and sewer and police. We've paid for engineering studies to verify that the city water and sewer systems have enough unused capacity to handle the development we're proposing. Adding these additional customers to the half of the city that's served by Bowie Public Works would strengthen the financial health and future maintenance of the city's entire public works system. We've heard some objections to our proposal. We've heard some people say Bowie is big enough, but I've also heard people say they're for responsible growth and maintaining the suburban character of Bowie. This, our proposal, is responsible, suburban, low-density growth. This slide shows the Maryland Department of Planning priority funding areas. Again, the property is here. That's 450 going into Route 3. Priority funding areas are defined as existing communities and places where local governments want state investment to support future growth. The population of Maryland is growing, forecast to increase about 0.5% a year for the next 4 decades, according to the Maryland Department of Planning. And a guiding principle of smart growth is to direct development towards existing communities. And both the state and county recommend this land for this kind of development. we're proposing a natural extension of the suburban pattern of development that started 6 decades ago. From Bowie's planning department data, the pace of new construction in Bowie since the turn of the century has not kept up with the population growth across the region and state. This chart is from the City of Bowie Planning Department, showing single-family building permits issued from 1991 to 2015. This is the most recent data the city has published, but you can see that very few building permits were issued overall from 2002 to 2015, and 0 townhouse permits during that time. So that's both before, during, and after the housing market crash that was generally 2008, 2009 for the low point. This next slide shows the master planned road network around the property. It's clear that the traffic on Route 450 is a major problem. We've heard that loud and clear from everybody in the area. It's a problem even if nothing ever gets built on White Marsh, and it's only going to get worse as more development happens in Anne Arundel County. The State Highway Administration has been planning to widen 450 since the 1990s, when they did the rest of 450 from the Capitol Beltway to Stony Brook Drive. The plans for the rest of the way to Route 3 have been on hold for over a decade. The state has never funded the project in the budget, and there is no momentum to move it forward in the foreseeable future. Even though it is at number 2 on the city's transportation priority list and number 6 on the county's list, it is on hold behind other higher priority projects. Namely, in Bowie, number 1 is Route 197. Although we can mitigate the impact of our development under state and county law without widening the highway, we have met with SHA and we are trying to work with them on a plan to jumpstart the construction of 450 and do it in a way that saves the state money by having us do some of the work. They're receptive to our ideas and we're continuing the discussion with them. We can spend money on interim improvements that compensate for our traffic impact for the number of houses we're talking, but we would much rather put that money towards a permanent solution that widens 450 in front of this property and improves the situation for all travelers, whether they're drivers or bikers or pedestrians. You can see the right-of-way already exists. The widening stops where the blue stops. Purple, the right-of-way exists, but it hasn't been widened. And then in front of the White Marsh property, that right-of-way hasn't been acquired yet by the state. So obviously that's one thing we can definitely control with this proposal, and then working with them, we think we can really push this project forward. The size of our project isn't big enough to pay for the ultimate widening on its own, but we can do a lot of the work on our own, do it for less money than the state, and make finishing the project a lot less expensive for the state and thus a lot easier to fund. We've also met with city, county, and state officials to discuss that idea, and we've got an encouraging response so far. And it will take political support to get that through with the state highway. Regarding the history, we've conducted a phase 1 archaeological study of the property that involved an archaeologist walking the entire property and hand digging test pits every 50 feet. That study identified 2 areas of potential significance at 2 old foundations. We're going to design the neighborhood to leave these foundations undisturbed. The archaeologist did not find any evidence of graves. If we were to find a grave during construction, we would follow the law, stop digging, and bring in the county and state experts to evaluate what we find and determine what to do with it. Besides preserving the areas of potential archaeological significance, we've also designed a wide buffer around Sacred Heart Church to be permanently preserved as forest. It is much wider than required by regulation and much wider than what would be done if the land is developed by right under the current large lot zoning. We worked on that buffer plan with the Archdiocese, Sacred Heart, and elected officials to come up with the appropriate amount of buffer to protect the setting of both the present-day parish and the historic chapel and cemetery. The kind of dim up there, but there's a red line. The white line is the property line between the Archdiocese, Sacred Heart Church, and the Jesuit property. On both sides, white. There's a red line. In Pod A, this is 75 feet to 125 feet going down that side. In Pod C, it starts at 200, goes to 300 feet and more coming down this side. In addition, the distance from the historic chapel, which is under the T in Sacred Heart, that distance is over 600 feet to the buffer down in this corner, rises up between 700 and 800 feet here, and it's over 900 feet from the west end of the chapel to the buffer line in Pod A. Under our proposal, we would leave 30 to 40% of the rezoned property as open space. Along with that, we'd meet any additional tree conservation requirement by recording permanent easements on the necessary acreage elsewhere on the Jesuit property, not parts of these pods A, B, and C, but same Jesuit property. We would be preserving open space on the province property at a much higher ratio than the 1950s and 60s developed areas of Bowie when the forest conservation regulations did not exist. A neighborhood of this size will take about 8 to 10 years to complete from when we start construction. We would be under construction for at least a year before the first house is finished. Probably 50 to 60 new families per year would join the community. We understand this would be a major change to the Bowie you're used to, but we're designing the project to fit in with your community as a continuation of the development that started in the 1950s. That concludes my presentation. I'll invite Senator Peters to say a few words, and then I'll take questions and comments from the audience. I'll be happy to take questions on that. Oh.
Good evening, everybody. I have a handout that is coming around, but let me just say this. You know, I have been opposed to this project for a long time. Not just this project, okay? But in 2006, this same thing happened when I was on the county council, okay? Developer came forward, wanted to upzone the property, and I downzoned the property. Before this happened here, you could put one home per every half acre by right on that property before 2006. So I changed it to make it so you could only put one home per every 2 acres on the property or one home per every 1 acre. Therefore, in essence, making it pretty infeasible to build, okay? So my issues were the following. Number one, the road has not been improved. It has not been improved since 2006. So nothing has changed. Nothing has changed with the road. The second issue is that Sacred Heart, that property, that church has been there for a long time, okay? And whether this developer continues to move forward, and you know, I've said to you, you know, you're going up against a brick wall, the political will's not there, the people aren't there, but whether they're successful or not, I'm not in the zoning business, it's the city council and the county council, but Sacred Heart has to be protected. It has to be protected in perpetuity, not just you know, if this developer comes along, then another one comes along, has a different idea, and another one comes along. So myself and Delegate Valentino Smith, who's here, we put a bill in that required this property at Sacred Heart to be protected. That's on the back side of your handout that you're going to get. And what's happened is the Archdiocese came forward, and you need to understand this is a little bit complicated because the Jesuits own the property, okay? A Catholic organization, but the Archdiocese owns Sacred Heart. So the two of them are really not partners on this issue because the Archdiocese wants to protect that piece of property. In fact, I just called them today. And the only way you can do that is to have covenants on the property, perpetual covenants on the property that say you can't do this. You have to have a buffer. And in fact, unfortunately, Monsignor Perry left us. And his big issue was the buffers on the property, the historic vista, the burial grounds, and in fact, he wanted the bells to ring at Sacred Heart in perpetuity because he read about a church that was there for 200 years in another state. Developer came and shut down the bells because the people who moved in didn't like the bells, okay? So that's the bells part of that, by the way. That's his signature. But the bottom line is this is the very beginning of a process. If the city council decides to annex the property, then the developer would have a right to get water sewer. They don't have the right to get water sewer now because when I downzoned the property, I also put it in the rural tier, which means they couldn't get water sewer, okay? So everything that was done in '06 is being brought to your attention tonight. And again, you know, many of us have met with the developer. We've told them that we don't think you should go forward. I personally think you should withdraw the zoning map amendment, which is what this is called. And, you know, we've spent, I think since '06, I was able to get $1 million to do a study to widen 197, and it's 2018, and we still haven't widened 197. And that's our #1 priority. So I don't see this road happening for at least 10 to 15 years. I mean, just given all the road projects there. So, you know, I just wanted to let everybody know where I stood, where Delegate Valentino Smith, and I know the mayor's here, and Dufour Wolfley, who did a lot, Councilman Wolfley, with Sacred Heart, to try to protect Sacred Heart in the future no matter what. So there's kind of two objectives here. We've got to protect Sacred Heart in perpetuity. We have to, and through covenants. But the second thing is, I don't support the upzoning of the property. The road needs to be, you know, widened like it should be. That's not going to happen for 15 years. So, you know, my suggestion is to withdraw respectfully. Okay? Thanks for giving me a minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jude. I know that it's always hard to come before a community and face the opposition. So the fact that you're here to help clarify things, we should at least be appreciative for. So I know that this is a community meeting, and I don't want to take up too much time because it's your time to get more clarification. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes to understand the foundation a little bit more as to why we're here. And first I want to say I did send out a rather detailed email about how we got here. And if you did not receive the email, as long as you signed on to City Councilman Estev's sheet and City Councilman Wolfley's sheet, they will give me those emails and we'll add you on to the list going forward for communication. But part of that communication, and Mr. Jude, what we want to understand, or I think the community needs clarification, I do, and what I think we want you to understand, is one, who is the owner of the property right now? The Jesuits. And you are the applicant/developer. So you have some kind of contract or arrangement with the Jesuits. Is that, what is that? You're the contract purchaser, so let's understand that. As the contract purchaser, how long is that in place? Is it contingent? At a certain point, is that contract contingent on something like obtaining water and sewer or obtaining a zoning amendment? And if those things do not occur, is the contract then no longer in place and the owner remains the Jesuit and you leave because there's no contract? But I think we need to understand right now, you as the applicant, how long do you have, the contingencies upon which the arrangement can continue, and do the Jesuits right now have any right of refusal in terms of what you're putting forward to the community, or have they relinquished everything in that contingent contract? And then I have a couple more, but let's...
So we are the contract purchaser. I'm going to respectfully decline to address the details of our contract. It's a private business arrangement with them. The Jesuits obviously have a very long-term view of the property. They the last whether they're involved in the plans. Yes, every plan, every application we submit, we sit down and review with them and get their approval before we've made any submittals at all to the county.
So
That's in the contract between us and the Jesuits. That's a private matter. We've got plenty of time.
all right, so you want to hold on to that. All right, so you've answered the question. I think you hear that we're concerned that this is such an important process, and you came here to help set a level of understanding with the community as to what we can expect from you as the applicant, but without any understanding of how long this can go on or what the contingencies are, will just, I will say, leaves us, or at least me, frustrated and uncertain. And I know you're not going to answer because
Well, it's sort of like President Obama saying we're going to leave Afghanistan or Iraq in 2009 and whenever that was. If I tell you, well, my contract ends in 2018, then you can,
All right,
we
let's-
just got to run out the clock on him.
No, let's try something different then. Does your contract end, or is it contingent on if you get water and sewer from the city? In other words, if you don't obtain water and sewer from the city, do you plan to continue the application for rezoning?
Yes, it's in the WSSC service area right now, and it's a longer extension, but we can connect to the WSSC services.
Okay, so you don't really need water and sewer from the city, and that's not something that you feel is necessary or a contingency in the contract?
The project is developable without city water and sewer.
On the
Yes.
same timeline? How far away is the nearest WSSC connection?
It's further than the water and sewer that's right on the property border.
Oh, I know that, but just give me a sense. Is it like way down 301, or how far away is the WSSC nearest connection? You must know from you said you had somebody come in and look at all the water issues and did a report on the city water system, and
They were evaluating the city system, make sure
But-
there was capacity there, and
the-
there is.
I'm assuming the reason you had them do that was because you knew how far away the WSSC connection was. How far away is it?
Right, it makes sense to connect to the city water and sewer. It's at the property
But-
as opposed to extending it thousands of feet.
But I'm just trying to understand, just simply, how far away is the current WSSC connection, as far as you know?
I don't know the exact distance off the top
Or
of my
you
head
can just
right
let me
now.
know. He'll send me the answer, and I'll send it out. How about that? Okay, that's good. So, now we're just trying to really understand what's happening with this significant project. So the next thing I needed to understand, and I think they might need to understand too, is that you talked about relying on the General Plan 2035 as the basis for this proposal being consistent with the development in the area, right? So you're
The
relying on
Plan 2035 and the 2006
Okay.
Bowie Master Plan.
All right, so let's just talk about that for a minute, because I think it will be helpful to you understanding at least my frustrations representing the community, but I suspect the community's frustrations. So Plan 2035 was a general plan. And when Park and Planning came to the city to hold up the big plan, because it's something they do, they said to the city, we don't do land-specific changes in this type of plan. It's not what this type of plan is designed for. The public, you all, understood at that time, those that follow land planning, you probably didn't need to be at every single meeting or follow it because it wasn't going to make land-specific changes. You all get active, and the city gets active when there's a master plan process going on. Then we all reasonably expect land will change. It's important land. Because I know you said that there were a lot of permits that weren't filed, but that's because at a certain point, you have to have some green space and some preservation in your community. You said the level of building permits didn't keep going up because we kind of reached saturation, and we're keeping some historic area. So in the general plan, nobody here knew or had reason to know that they should be commenting on the importance of that land staying preserved and historic, as Senator Peters had done when he was on the county council. And they did not have the opportunity to talk about the need for that land to stay rural, because the general plan shouldn't have changed that. And we know the general plan shouldn't have changed that property because Park and Planning issued a report and advice to the county council and said, you should not take this piece of land, which is preserved, priority, right? It was zoned, like Senator Peters said, you couldn't really develop it. said, you should not do this. Park and Planning said to the county council, you should not do this. We're advising you not to do it. It's not proper. Not enough has been taken into consideration, and you have not heard from the public. Now, this is just what I want to clarify, because I know you want the public to understand, where you are as the applicant. During that process, 3 exhibits were submitted to the county council. Were you involved with council at that time, or was council involved for you in helping to submit exhibits or helping during that process to get a general plan amendment? Were you or your company or attorneys involved?
No, we had nothing to do with this property until after that happened. So I can't speak to any of the Plan 2035 changes.
Or the
how they happened.
attorneys? Okay. It just, I think Mr. Hatcher might be able to answer, because you ended up being the same attorney for the, you ended up being the same attorney, I guess coincidentally or not, for the developer and the applicant/developer and the owners, the Jesuits. Did you not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So,
Yeah, so during the general plan process, the property owner and council, myself, the Sacred Heart Church and the Archdiocese of Washington put letters of support to not rezone the property, because through a general plan you can't rezone a property. You can change some policies and boundary areas. So what was done, what the letters recommended or requested was, your senator is 100% accurate. He moved the rural tier up to 450. So south of 450 was in the rural tier, north of 450 was not. What those letters did and what the county council did in adopting the general plan was move the, they removed the designations for rural tiers, so rural tiers don't really exist anymore, but the equivalent of the rural tier was moved down past where it was in 2002. So essentially, this was in the established communities, and it would have been because the amendment didn't really impact Pod B, but the amendment did impact Pod A and C to move it from what was the rural tier to now what is the established communities.
so, it gets complicated. Let me just,
Yeah.
if it had not been moved in this general plan amendment, which was Park and Planning advised against, and which the public did not know, because you don't normally move preserved land to a tier where it can be developed. If it had not been moved, you could not even be here proposing an upzoning now, right? Because it would still be in the, you would be asking for a zoning map amendment to land that was priority preserved and historic, instead of it being in this new tier now. You moved it in a tier to a developing tier in the general plan, because you said that's what you're relying on. The general plan 2035 is your kind of,
That and the master plan, even going back to 2006, the master plan suggested low-density residential development.
it suggested it, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the definition of low density, according to the chart, is up to 3.5 units per acre. And
So, that's, okay, that brings me to another point. So, I'm sorry, am I taking too much time? We'll just go through this. So that, the master vicinity plan and the master plan, I put a piece of legislation in when this first came out that said, look, you're right, the master plan and the Bowie vicinity plan, they are the right place to make the decision. It wasn't a right to build, but it was, should that area be developed or not? And said, let's not let this go forward. Let's not allow a hearing officer to make a decision, Senator Peters and I, until the public has had a master planning process and a master vicinity plan, and they've had a chance to have adequate public notice and input. And so as a community, what I was saying in representing them to the owners, the Jesuits, and to you, the developer, was if this is indeed consistent with a master plan, wait until the new master plan's coming up and let the public have its input and let the decision be made then. And that was vehemently opposed by you guys during session. So so that you understand the tone and the framework is that it got moved in a general plan amendment for which nobody had any public notice. It got moved because 3 exhibits were put in by the Archdiocese, Sacred Heart, and the Jesuits because an attorney kind of met with them and suggested they put these exhibits in, and their exhibits asked the county council to change the land because it was going to be consistent with Catholic use in the area and maybe some and senior housing. And I believe that at that point, whoever was putting the exhibits in was being led to believe that the property needed this change so that a Catholic consistency could occur on that land that might serve veterans, might serve the elderly in a way consistent. But once those letters were written, the county council in one day, the same day, well, the letters were written, but the same day it was brought up before I have the date stamps. You can jump in, Chris, here if I'm wrong. So the exhibits went in November or December, and in February, was it February? I didn't bring my file. I'm sorry, let's just make sure we get this right. So in February, so the exhibits went in late November, towards the way end of the process. And they went in because the attorneys here, went over and said, why don't you write these letters? Because the land could get used for this kind of purpose. Now, I don't want to speak for the letter signers, but I've read the letters and I have a sense. So it's my understanding, Mr. Fletcher, that the day that the exhibits were brought up before the county council and the amendment was made to the general plan is the same day that they voted on the amendment to the general plan. The county council brought it up that day and voted on the same day, right?
They voted in March or April.
But they brought the idea of the exhibits were submitted in November, but they and they did it right on that same day. Isn't that something? So just so you understand, it gives you a tone here for the frustrations that you're hearing and the request that the senator has to withdraw the zoning map amendment, because you have a community now that saw this land change in a fashion for which they had no notice, and in a fashion in which the county council acted in one day, which would have never even given the city planning department time to understand what was happening and activate the city council and or the city. So I just wanted to, unless I'm wrong, I just wanted to lay that as the foundation for some of the frustrations here tonight. And so you opposed the legislation, we went through that, the 3 exhibits. You don't have a time limit. Like right now, unfortunately, land at Hilltop, and we're a sensitive community because we've got this land sitting at Hilltop that has a zoning map amendment filed on that too for apartments behind there. And it's been sitting there for like 5 or 6 years. Yeah, it's been sitting there for a little while. So is that could we expect that this could just sit and sit and sit, or do you have some sense for the community of we're going to make the decision on whether we get water and sewer, and then we're going to ask the county to act? Because you right now asked the county not to act on the application, right?
Right, that we wanted to have time to engage with the community. And also, I can't relitigate the general plan, I can't really speak to that, but by being here tonight and it was 2 years ago in July, I think, or August, that we first went to the council. September of 2016, we had the first stakeholders meeting. We're trying to show that we're not trying to force this down anybody's throats. We're trying to be patient. We're trying to engage.
And so that's what, I'm going to
And-
let everybody come up with specific things.
But also, I want to point out, as I said, my company has been in business for a long time. The Jesuits have been on the property for 300 years. I think we both have a long-term perspective on this.
I just wanted you, given what you're making a very sincere kind of advertisement here about your commitment, wanted you to understand the level of severity of the concerns for the way that this land changed in the dark of night, changed with attorneys that were representing you now, and then send something to the Archdiocese. And
As you
this-
pointed out, both
as-
the Archdiocese and Sacred Heart submitted letters in favor of the change.
And so if they submitted letters in opposition now, or took opposition to the zoning change before the county council, just as you wanted the county, or thought the county should respond to their exhibits to change the rural tier, I believe the county council then should respond if they decide to oppose it. Would
All
you be as
adjoining
respectful of that position as you were when, of the position that you just said, well, they put in letters asking for it to change to the rural tier, so now what if they opposed it?
We've been meeting with the Archdiocese and with Sacred Heart since before we ever submitted the application, and we've been working as hard as we can to try and come up with a project that they'll endorse.
But you have not been given any impression, and
It's gone back and forth.
so you would say that you're actively still negotiating with adjacent landowners?
Yes.
Okay. Have you approached Cornerstone at all, or been
Yes,
working
I've
with
met
them
with
at all?
Pastor Mark there a couple times and spoken with him. Last time I spoke with him was a couple weeks ago to invite him to tonight's meeting. He
So,
he
no,
said he
yeah,
couldn't be here, but I'm sure he said he was going to be represented.
He has representatives here, yeah. So I guess in closing, it is then that you understood that there was some support to move this from the general plan, from the Archdiocese and from Sacred Heart, but you have no reason to believe they're continuing to support the change, and that the community now has concerns not only about traffic, but the right to continue to have some land preserved around us. And when Senator Peters downzoned this land, it was a balance. I know you said the plan talked about it. There was a balance between lands down on 301 that were then being upzoned, and this land was to be kept that way. So the master plan that you're talking about envisioned a balance of land not being completely developed, and that got thrown off by this general plan amendment. That, I just wanted you to understand, is some of the frustration. Thank you. I hope I didn't take too much time. You just need to understand.
Councilmember Estep, or, no, sorry. Yes, sir? Or-
Also explains what appears to be a conflict in the representation of both the buyer and an interested party by the same council. Did I understand that the Archdiocese signed on to a document that was prepared by council that also represented your company?
No, I don't think so. Again,
Yeah, I don't, and I never have represented the Archdiocese of Washington.
No, I was asking about the Archdiocese. I thought that there was a document that was prepared by all the interested parties and presented to Park and Planning to demonstrate agreement to the transaction. And one of those parties that was demonstrating agreement through this document was the Archdiocese. Did I misunderstand that?
No, there were a series of letters submitted into the general plan in 2013.
And were they prepared by the Archdiocese, or were they prepared by the same council as the interested party in the transaction?
I actually am not entirely sure who prepared them. I know.
the Archdiocese definitely had
Yeah.
professional representation, though.
Yeah, but the Archdiocese definitely has professional representation, and they definitely signed them, and they definitely submitted them. Yeah, the documents that are in the general plan are public record.
And then on top of that, thank you. On top of that, I mean, we have a group in this room, a couple people I know of that, and made history by getting a perfectly fine political candidate out of office who put all that energy into that. And you're right in their backyard, like literally right in their backyard. So you're going to be faced with huge community opposition. So I don't think this is a normal investment for you guys. So have you calculated the investment or how much it's going to cost you over the years to put in, you know, have your lawyers come out talking to the community fighting it, and you still find it beneficial?
Right, we understand the opposition. I've also heard from supporters of the project. Some live adjacent to the project. So we understand the opposition. That's why I'm trying to make the case that this is smart growth, because I've also read the Bowie Recall website, and that's where I got the quotes for we're for responsible growth, we're for suburban development. So I hear the opposition. One of the reasons that we've not rushed into the hearings was obviously because of the recall to see what's happening. You know, I've reached out to Councilmember Wolfley. I know where his position is on this. We have a respectful dialogue with Senator Peters, Delegate Valentino Smith. We're not dodging anybody, and we understand the opposition. And, you know, I can't tell you what's going to happen down the road, but for now we're going to continue working on this.
So you guys don't have another location you'd rather invest, though? You're up.
We have many projects throughout the Baltimore and Washington regions, yes. So, ma'am?
Excuse me, sir. My name is Pastor Arnold at Cornerstone Church, and you mentioned that you guys proposed a plan to help do something on 450, but you didn't mention specifically what that was going to be and how it would help. But since January, we've had probably about 8 serious accidents right out the front side of our church because 450 is already dangerous right now. So, and just hearing what it is that you guys specifically plan to do, that we wouldn't have to wait 15 years for the state or whatever to finish. I just wanted to hear what plans you guys had for that.
Sure. We've actually invested in some engineering on that to figure out what's feasible. As Senator Peters said, there's really no momentum. I think that 10 to 15 years time frame is probably optimistic, given how long 197 has taken. I think we can really shorten that time frame. When we met with State Highway, we proposed to them that by us dedicating the right-of-way, engineering it, and doing some of the construction work, as much as we can afford to do, that we can basically advance them down the field instead of starting at their own goal line, have them a whole lot further, where it's a lot smaller budget to complete the project at that point. No, we're talking about a 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction divided highway with XL, decel, and turn lanes for entrances. So, I mean, that's what it needs to be. It's in the master plan. Dave, can you talk to Dave Nelson's our traffic engineer. I'm going to ask him to speak to the 450 situation.
Hi, just to probably address the issues. One of the first things we did when we got involved in the project, when Jude called us, is we understood right up front that traffic was going to be a major issue. And not that this really applies, but I've been living in Bowie for the last 30 years, and I drive that road every day. But one of the things that became very clear to us, because if you look at that map, there's a missing piece. The state started widening 450 in the 2000s. And in 2006, they came all the way up into the center of Bowie and they stopped. And we came in initially and said, well, we've got the right of way. look what we can do, maybe we can work together, and there was no, that's right, there was really very little support that we got. But we've been able to take it to the next level and show them that there's really an opportunity with a partnership here for us to actually finish this missing link. There's a 10-mile length of 450 from the Beltway all the way to Route 3. There's a 1.5-mile missing element. Of that, the area in front of this property is 2 lanes. And you really don't have to be a traffic engineer to know that you've got 4 lanes on one side, 4 lanes on the other, and 2 in the middle, and you're going to have a problem. But the main thing that I would present, when it is true, is we found, and it's very clear, that this project to widen 450 along this missing link is going nowhere in the near future without some form of a partnership that we have available here. So, and as Jude said earlier, that the traffic on 450 is going to increase. There should be an opportunity to correct that problem. And that's what we've been working with the state, and we've gotten some pretty good feedback recently. We're actually working, we started out at the district engineer level thinking this is the process, you work your way up. That went nowhere. We're working with the deputy administrators coming down, and it's actually becoming very positive what we can do. To answer the question, the master plan for 450 in this link is a 4 to 6 lane divided highway. So if you can picture 450 to the west, it's 4 lanes with auxiliary turn lanes. Our goal is to maintain that same structure through here, and it would actually mirror that. So whatever you see down by, the high school, the way the road is built there, we would continue that all the way through to Route 3. That's our goal. And in order to accomplish that, again, 400 houses may sound like a lot of houses, but it's not enough to build an arterial highway. But it really is an opportunity to create a partnership to finish it. And that's the way we presented it to the state. And again, it's not done. I mean, don't take that the wrong way. We're a long way from there, but we feel that we can accelerate it and almost build it for half the cost, which would save the Maryland community millions of dollars. If the state were to go forward, let me just finish real quick. If the state, in order for them to build a highway, has to go through project planning, then they go into design, and then they go to right-of-way acquisition, then they go to construction. Because this project has been on hold for so long, they've got to go back and start from scratch, even though it's a small piece of road. We have the ability, by working together, to kind of not sidestep anything. Everything would have to be built to state standards. It would have to be permitted by the state. So it's not like we're sidestepping things, but because we don't have to, we can sidestep some of the process, that road can be improved a lot faster. I'm not saying it's going to be built next year. It's not. This development isn't going to be built next year. We're not going to, we're talking about 400 homes. It isn't like in 1 year you're going to see 400 homes. We're talking about bringing it on in 50 lot increments. That's where we would work with the state. So we've got time to work with the state to come up with a plan to finish this road. I mean, I think as traffic engineers, it's almost unconscionable to see this kind of road. Just like 197, you've got 4 lanes on top, 6 bottom, and 2 lanes in the middle. Of course, you're going to have problems. And but the thing I would really like to emphasize is it's very clear in our discussions at the state level with the politicians that if something like this doesn't happen, that's not going to happen. So.
Question about health concern, because these houses are pretty close, it looks like on the border, to where the Bowie Public Works is located. And I thought I had remembered in the past that there was something in place that you couldn't actually build that close to any sort of public, either landfill or area like that.
I'm not aware of anything like that, and when we submitted this plan to the county, none of the referrals from the health department or anybody else came back identifying that as a concern, because it's slightly further away than Idlewild. Ma'am in the purple, I know you were being patient, and I didn't get you with the microphone, so. Sure. Can I- Since Mark's recording it, if we speak into the microphone, the city's going to put this presentation on the website in a couple days, so that's...
Okay, I'm going back to your archaeological, and you said he dug holes every 50 feet. Now, my understanding, having spent several times in archaeological digs, not only is it a grid, but you also have to sift that soil, and how far down did he go? Because while the Jesuits may have owned the land for 300 years, don't forget that this area, and I'm pretty sure it was the Algonquin tribe of Native Americans, controlled a fair amount of this turf. So it's not just 300 years old history, we're going back to Native American tribal history. So my question is, did he just dig a hole? Did he shift it the way you're supposed to?
He's a professional archaeologist. He met the requirements of only a Phase 1 archaeological
A
study.
Phase 1 archaeological is a large grid, dug so many centimeters, millimeters, feet down, and the soil is not only dug out, but it is sifted.
Yes,
I've done this before.
He performed it to the professional requirements, and it's been
Do we
reviewed
have
by
his
the
report?
county and the Maryland Historical Trust. It's part of our record, yes.
And is it available for us to look at?
I think it's on the city website with the other documents, but yes, it's part of our record of our application. It's been submitted to the county. So it's available, yes.
I did have another question about the traffic. I didn't think we were quite finished. The issue isn't simply 450. If you go east on 450, pick a Friday afternoon, when you get there and try to turn onto Route 301, it's still a nightmare. And what we're about to do is develop an area, a big area with one inlet and one outlet. We want to put some more townhouse apartments up, right up the street on 450. And we haven't done any of that, and the traffic's already bad. And merely fixing 450, making it like the rest of the 450 roadway, is not going to solve the problem.
The state master, so on the master plan, this portion in red here is actually master planned as a future, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but grade separated interchange. That is much further out even than the 450 widening. It's a separate project, but
Just to clarify the process a little bit, again, we've talked about how this isn't going to be an immediate thing. It's a long-term process, and there's a significant number of reviews that are done. Traffic is one of them, schools, archaeological, and at this stage in the rezoning process, the transportation test is to make sure that we're not overburdening the master plan. As Geraldine had said, we've got to make sure that there's a balance between land use and transportation, balance between land use and school. At this point, the required studies are to show that the change that we're doing, which in this case is the increase in the number of units from what the existing zoning is to what is being requested, is not going to adversely impact the master plan. And when you do that, you test it to the master plan of highways. And so what you do is you make sure that we aren't making a proposal that the master plan can't accommodate. In this case, it means can 450 as a 4-lane divided highway accommodate it? Can Church Road as a 4-lane collector accommodate it? Can the freeway of Maryland 3 accommodate it? And it includes the interchange. That's what we do at the rezoning stage. So you make sure from a global perspective that the transportation network balances. Assuming that the zoning is approved, you go to the next step. And then you do a more detailed traffic study. You're looking at intersections, you're looking at access. And assuming that that's approved, then you do an operational analysis. And every stage of that is reviewed by the city, by Public Works, by Park and Planning, by the State Highway Administration, to prove that things are adequate. In this case, because Route 3, again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Route 3 is great, because it's not. It should be a freeway. It should have been a freeway 10 years ago. But the land use approvals allow us to mitigate our improvements. Which means we can make improvements to the intersection that offset our impact. That's probably 2 years from now, we'll be coming here presenting studies that show you how we're going to do that. Right now, we're just, and I'm very confident that the proposal from a transportation perspective does not adversely impact the master plan. It's very clear. It's been reviewed by the state, by Park and Planning. They agree. That's where we are today. At the same time, we're trying to make sure, because we believe 450 is a critical issue to us, as Jude had mentioned, we can make improvements that are local improvements. But the way the road is aligned, anything that we would do would get torn out. spend $1 million doing one improvement and have it torn out, where we can take that $1 million, and I'm not talking, I'm not saying they're going to do it, but a significant amount of money and apply it to a long-range fix instead of a short-term fix. That's where we're going with this.
Okay, gentleman with the microphone, then Dave, if you'll give that mic to the man in the back in the T-shirt, and then we'll go to Ms. Moody next after that, if that's okay? So, sir.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming and doing this presentation, because I know it's not easy. I don't even know where to start with some of this stuff, but I do share very much the archaeological concerns that have been voiced here. I don't think enough work has been done on that. I think the boundary is too close to an area of great historical interest for many different groups of the population, and I think that needs to be readdressed. Now, I know that you have the boundary of the land as ownership exists today, and that's how it was given to you in the project. But I think there are definitely questions about where that boundary should be and how much the character of the area around Sacred Heart is changed as a result of the development. That's part of this. One other thing, though, I was very interested to hear delegates' comments about this and supported what I was suspecting, and that is, although everybody has directed a lot of attention to the city over this project, it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that the city really hasn't got much influence over this project at all. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. That's why we're here.
That's why I
We're in a
complimented
Bowie
you.
City building. We're here talking to Bowie
Yeah.
residents.
That's why I
So,
complimented you on coming, but you did point out that if the city declined the water and sewage rights, you had other ways of getting it and you would continue with the project in any case. So holding the city responsible for what you're doing is probably not the best thing to do. It's a county issue, isn't it? And beyond.
So this is an open forum, and hopefully you have supporters here who have listened to what you had to say. I know one of the purposes in coming here is to try to build some sort of consensus and try to get a partnership and people to support your position, vote for the zoning, try to help this project move forward. So I'd like to do an informal poll of the room. I'd like to find out how many people here are supporting this project moving forward in any way, shape, or form. Okay, we got 2. How many would tend to vote for any of the zoning changes that will help this go forward?
Sir, I appreciate the exercise.
How
but-
many people here oppose this in any form? Thank you. I think you have your consensus.
Wait a sec. It was Ms. Moody? Or can you pass that mic?
First off, I have a comment for the traffic study. I find it hard to believe that you are going to describe the stretch of road as an unconscionable state as a traffic planner, and then you're going to add 2.3 cars per household at about 500 homes. We're looking at over 1,200 cars in a stretch of road that's horrible. And it's not just that stretch. As was previously mentioned, it's all up and down 450. That little stretch of road is not just the problem. It's 301, it's the entire corridor, and we're looking at multiple development plans. I do not know how you can sit here as a Bowie resident and in good conscience look your neighbors in the eye and say that this is not going to cause any problems to our neighborhood and it's not going to cause any problems to the surrounding areas. Mr. Jude, you've told me and my fellow residents that early on in the process you conducted due diligence efforts. I do not believe that to be true. As Delegate Geraldine Valentino-Smith already said, PG 2035 was to have no land-specific amendments, yet this process was fast-forwarded by the County Council with no input from the community. There was no master plan process, and as a result, every resident in this room feels alienated. We've been left out of the decision-making process regarding one of the last remaining historic pieces of property in this area. Your unwillingness to engage in open and transparent process early on and even this evening leaves everyone in this room cold. We all know that the park and planning will demand that the Ivy Lane link-up be part of this plan, as there is not going to be enough allowance on 450 for all the cars that you wish to run out there. Racetrack Road 450 corridor is a nightmare, and it will be, despite the impact of your improvements. And we all know that the roads in this area are overburdened, and this property is of historic significance not only to the Catholic Church, but the history of our nation. Our community has stood strong in the past against greedy developers, and we won. We're going to do so again. I respectfully ask that you withdraw your request for a rezoning.
Thank you for making those points. I don't know how much more transparent I can be. Every presentation I've given has had my name and phone number and email address. I'm willing to engage anybody at any time. That's why we're here tonight. We don't want the community to feel alienated on this process. We don't, again, we've slowed this down. The regular timeline, the timeline we showed back in 2016, had us a lot further along by now, but and so we've come back trying to find something we can bring back to the community to say, hey, here's what we have to offer. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Can we,
Okay. I'll be real quick.
so why don't we go from here then over to the lady in the gray sweater, please?
Okay, I have a question. Have you done a study about our landfill that is right next door to your property about methane gas leakage?
The province has professional engineers working on that with the State Department of Health. That's about as detailed as I know about it, but in the environmental studies we did on the property we have under contract, there wasn't a methane effect that was endangering the property that we're trying to rezone.
Well, many places that have landfills have methane gas leakage. Would you want to live next door to a dump?
Well, again, they cap that. They work with the State Department of Environment on how a landfill has to be terminated when it's out of use, and then it's monitored for a number of years. Yeah, I'm not a landfill expert, but the professional studies we've done says it's safe.
Well, in this environment, I hope it's not a pay-to-play game that you're playing.
I just want to add to the traffic situation. I've worked at State Highway for 8 years. I'm not a traffic engineer, but I am a roadway engineer. I've been in the industry for 11 years, so I don't know the numbers behind your calculations and all, but I do know that you got to add a signal, at least one, maybe two in there, which is going to delay the travel time from point A to point B if point A was from 301 and B is Racetrack Road. So right now the delay is not too bad. I drive it every day coming home from work, and it might add about 2 minutes to my commute in worst case situation. But by the time you add a signal in there, additional traffic, it's going to be a wash for me getting from point A to point B anyway. And so you are improving the road to move more traffic, but from an individual standpoint of our travel time from one end to the other, it's going to be a moot point. So.
Well, and that's a place where there's going to have to be a compromise, because we sat down with Monsignor Perry back when he was still the pastor, and that was the first thing he said, was talking about the access problems for Sacred Heart. So we said, okay, we'll design the north side main entrance to align with Sacred Heart's parking lot, and that we then, when we put in our state highway plans, apply for a signal there that it benefit both Sacred Heart and the residences we're proposing on the north side. So, again, some people are going to want a signal, some people aren't going to want a signal. It won't even be up to us, because State Highway runs the numbers on a signal warrant study and tells us whether or not we have to put one in there. I can't really see them putting two in between Racetrack and Route 3. That doesn't seem like the numbers work on that.
My question is,
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
talking about a 6-lane highway going up 450. Where are you going to acquire the land without going right to the doorstep of Cornerstone and Sacred Heart?
It would all...
It will have to condemn all of our land in between to get 6 lanes in there.
The master plan right-of-way is contained on the property that we have under contract with the Jesuits. It doesn't take any property from Cornerstone or from Sacred Heart.
It's not wide enough there for a six-lane.
Hi, it may be difficult to see, and maybe if Jude can point while we're talking. The right-of-way, and right at the intersection, the green line is Racetrack Road. The red wide area is 450, but that's the master plan right-of-way of 450. The master plan actually called for the new road to actually be shifted to the south, away from the shopping center, away from Sacred Heart, away from the funeral home. So it'll actually become on to probably maybe 50 feet south of the existing road and come along. It does not impact the right-of-way of the funeral home. It doesn't. So basically what we would call it as engineers is it holds the right-of-way that exists and it widens to the south. So there's no additional impacts. In fact, the width, it's hard to tell on here, but it's over 200 feet wide in order to put that road in there. It's the widest area along the entire thing. You can see by the shopping center where the Giant is, that's about 150 feet where the road will be built inside of that.
Around for 15 more years. However, am I going to have to put up with construction trucks going up and down that road for the next 15 years while you build your 50 units at a time?
The 15 years was Senator Peters' reference. He said 10 to 15 years before anything would start on 450. Just for clarification, I had said that once we start construction, I'd expect it to take 8 to 10 years to build out the neighborhood.
8 to 10
Yes.
years
So,
at my age is still a long batch.
I understand, ma'am. I just want to make sure that I'm being clear on that. But yes, there would be construction traffic during that time.
So on the already loaded road we have, with not counting the extra development that's going around that area, we're also going to have massive construction trucks going in and out every day.
There will be traffic.
Thank you.
There is traffic today, and that's not going to change.
Good evening. I just want to know if your plan includes support beyond building and putting roads in. So public services and schools, is there any other support beyond just coming in and putting houses? Are you in it for the long haul, or is it's just for?
The school capacity, with our application, they studied that and said there's existing capacity in the local schools. When we design a neighborhood, there's parks for the residents within the neighborhood. We're also proposing trail connections to White Marsh Park that would benefit the whole city to pass through there. But for 400 houses isn't big enough for one school or anything like that.
Additionally, as part of the process, we have to pay a school surcharge fee, which for about 440 units comes out to approximately over $7 million, and a public safety surcharge comes out to just over $3 million.
Let me go to the side first, please. Sure. Go ahead, Sue. Or you guys.
All right, thank you for being here, and I appreciate you being here and talking to us. As you can tell, we're not very warm to this. I live in Idlewild. I live on Idlewild Drive. I back up directly to where it's going to directly affect me. The homes you plan on putting there, I think you had mentioned in the last meeting an approximate price range. Are you planning on competing kind of with the Levitt homes as far as price goes?
Not the original prices.
No, come on.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
Come on. This is one of the reasons why we're having a hard time trusting you. Please.
I can't speak to the prices of the homes. I think as you look around new construction in Prince George's County, similar neighborhoods, what single-family homes and townhouses go for, that's the market to compete against.
Okay.
I think they probably cost more than what I see for the assessed values in Idlewild, but I can't, and the planning board and the district council can't tell me, hey, you got to start at this price, or you have to meet this price.
I understand that.
It's just.
So I'm hearing you, and what I'm hearing is that, yeah, you're going to compete directly with my home. If I put it on the market and there's a home brand-new home at the same price range, same square footage, how, who's going to buy, who's going to buy what? They're going to buy a brand-new home rather than a 50-year-old home. Now, I just have a hard time understanding how somebody would want a 50-year-old home rather than a brand-new home at the same price, same square footage. So I would understand, and I understand growth. It's inevitable. Responsible growth to me is where it needs to be. It's currently zoned R1. I'd have no problem with that. I really wouldn't. It wouldn't add to the traffic problems. It wouldn't affect the value of my home because the homes you would put on there would be much higher in value. So you had made a point about zoning, about 3-point-some houses per acre was what you called, what did you call that kind of?
In the state planning documents, low-density residential is a range
so
of
if-
0.5 to 3.5.
So that's low density.
units
So
per
what
acre.
is R1?
Well,
Is that low density? What is,
the zone right now is RE, residential estate, on north of 450,
Right.
and that's a yield of about, or a 1-acre lot.
I could deal with that. Would you develop the property if the zoning didn't change? Would your company go forward with the development of the property if the zoning didn't change?
We're considering all alternatives.
Really? So that's what I think. So, all right. Thank you. I just was curious about the values and my property value and what your development is going to do to my value. And I think everybody here knows.
This gentleman in the front here.
I've lived in Bowie for over 30 years. I've seen some good things. I've seen some bad things happen in Bowie. Traffic is the biggest bad thing in Bowie right now. All of you have driven it. All of you have seen it. I went to a highway Department of Transportation, whatever, highway proposal on 301 10 years ago. They said they wouldn't even think about it for 20 years. He wants to build. You know how the traffic is on 301 and on 450. I've left Central Avenue going to Crofton on a Friday afternoon. It took me 80 minutes. 80 minutes, I time it. The traffic at Pointer Ridge is a backup. The traffic at 450 in 301 is a backup. Then you know what it's like when you hit Crofton. 80 minutes, and you're going to add more cars in it? That's 301. That's not even counting 450.
Well,
on a Friday afternoon, my wife and I go out to dinner every Friday. You think I head to Crofton area? You think I shop in Bowie because of traffic? I get on 50 and go someplace else to eat dinner because I won't travel in Bowie. Think of what that's doing to the businesses of Bowie. Think about it. How many restaurants lose business because of traffic? And you want to increase it by building more houses?
Again.
And like the lady said here, the construction trucks running on the road now?
But that traffic's bad with or without the subdivision we're proposing. And if you own a restaurant in one of these shopping centers, it's right up the road, and I'm offering you 440 more customers, families right there, instead of somebody who's got to drive 25 minutes to get there, I think it's a win for the businesses of Bowie.
Did you hear what I just said? I'd leave Bowie because of the traffic to go shopping. I'd leave Bowie to go get dinner on Friday night because of traffic. And your philosophy is building more houses are going to put more people shopping in Bowie?
As I said, the population's increasing whether or not we build these houses. Those people are either going to live here or drive through here to get where they're going.
I just had one quick question, going back to your original presentation. What was the size for the buffer that you were recommending around the property? Around the historical aspects of the
Around
property?
Sacred Heart, it's on the east side, it's 200 to 300 feet from the property line, which is 600 feet and up from the front door of the chapel there. On the west side, it's 75 to 125 feet from the property line, which is over 900 feet from the chapel. And we had numerous meetings, Senator Peters' office going back and forth on the buffers there, making sure they were adequate. We're happy to covenant the bells. We've got a contractual obligation with the Jesuits to record covenants on the property governing the uses, making sure that it's something that's not incompatible with their beliefs and traditions.
Well, the 1992 study that they did said that a substantial portion of the recommended historical acoustical protection zone area, which is part of your development zone in pods B and C, contains steep wooded slopes, non-tidal wetlands, and areas of the 100-year FEMA flood plan. As a result of these site constraints, any intensive development activity such as residential, commercial, or active recreational construction would be infeasible from an engineering perspective. The minimum site and acoustical buffer recommended by this analysis is an average of 800 feet from the ridge line surrounding the White Marsh complex.
We've read that 1992 study. We saw the 800-foot number. It is, as you said, it's an average around the distance. It's not a hard and fast engineering study determined. Well, again, and that's a recommendation, but it's not necessarily backed up by engineering in every direction, and so that's why the distances we propose we think are appropriate. And again, we reviewed them with the property owner and the state senator, and we think it protects the property, both the present use of Sacred Heart and the historic property. Where's Mike? Oh, sorry.
We've talked about a lot of things tonight, about cars and roads and congestion. But what about the ecological impact of this? About our air quality, our wildlife, taking down all those trees? I mention this, it's dear to me because about 2 or 3 summers ago, and I live in Rockledge, I don't live near woods. A starving fox, I'm sorry, came into my backyard. He was nothing but skin and bones. And I couldn't do anything for him because all my meat was frozen. And I kept thinking, where is your home? Why are you in my backyard? Where's your home? What happened to your food source? I thought about it for a while, and I thought, well, it's probably under either blacktop or cement.
Well, as I said, if we design to the houses we're proposing right now, the trees we preserve on site would be over 30% of the property, and the additional tree mitigation that we'd have to preserve permanently would also be on the adjacent Jesuit property. So, and again, those regulations didn't exist when the Levitts did Rockledge, when they bought that from the Jesuits. The open space that we're proposing is more than you're going to see in those other neighborhoods. So we're trying to address that.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up something. I've been in Bowie for 40 years, and somewhere over 30 years ago, on the east side of your Pod C up there, the sand and gravel works that were running, we understood at the time that those were closed. It was because of all the asbestos they were throwing up. And I just don't know whether you all have addressed that directly or not.
We have not. We did environmental studies on the site in our due diligence and did not find any problems with asbestos.
Not on the site.
Well, where the asphalt batch plant was, this cleared area here.
Right.
And no, we haven't found any problems with asbestos. So I'm not sure if that was anecdotal, if there was a study to back that up. But I really can't address that. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for recognizing me. I think looking at the big picture, what disturbs me most about this is the process. I think what you have done is taken a feature of the new general plan, which is a vision, and used it to try to circumvent the master plan process. Okay, by the way, the general plan says new housing should be focused around metro stations, transit-oriented development. This is 10 miles from a metro station. It's more sprawl. Now, the master plan from 2006 says that this area, which was in the rural tier, should be the transition between the suburban and the green areas, okay? And that's why it was down zoned. Okay, so now you've taken a feature of the general plan and claimed it as your own and asked for an upzoning. But master plans amend general plans. General plans don't amend the master plans. It's the other way around. And the proper way to go about getting rezoning, as Delegate Valentino Smith said, is to go through a new master plan process, which, as I understand it, is on the books for within the next 2 years. So that's the process that we need to go through to decide. And that master plan can put this property back in the rural and agricultural area, just the way it is, and leave the zoning the way it is. So that is what we're losing here by this attempt to kind of jump ahead beyond where the current master plan is, in advance of a real discussion of where the boundaries should be in Bowie.
Well, both the 2006 master plan and the general plan called for low-density residential development on these properties. And the master plan process, they just don't happen that regularly. I understand that Councilmember Turner got that funded last year.
Right.
But then he told us that it's got to wait till after the zoning rewrite, and that's up in the air right now. So, and 2 years ago, when we started working on this with the Jesuits and started talking to the city and the county, that master plan wasn't being proposed to be reviewed anytime in the foreseeable future. And so rezonings happen outside the master plan process. If there's a master plan process, we'll work with it, but we still don't know today when that's going to happen.
Well, we know that the zoning rewrite, they're already having their final hearings on it. They're in a hurry to get this approved before the new council comes in. So we're talking here just about maybe 18 months or 2 years before this whole thing could be resolved. And I don't understand why we can't deal with that. You know, they could put this, like I said, back in the rural tier with even lower density than what you're talking about. So that really leaves a bad taste here. You're bringing all these people out and you're mixing things up, and it's just not the correct way to do things. Master plans amend general plans. You don't do it the other way around.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, just to clarify, that the master plan does specifically recommend a rezoning to a, quote, a residential CDZ at select locations, and it lists it specifically lists the property owned by and I quote, the Corporation of Roman Catholic Clergymen on both sides of 450 as one of those areas. So there absolutely was a change in the general plan in 2014. But this application, as noted by us in our statement of justification, as well as noted by staff, park and planning staff in their referral, specifically analyzes the 2006 master plan and the general plan. So to the extent that there's questions about whether the master plan specifically recommends a rezoning to a low-density residential CDZ, check on page 16. It's in the book. It's in the book. I agree. It says both of them. Yes, it's on page, yes. Thank you.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
You've talked about the buffer areas in Pod A and Pod C. How about the north side of Pod B? How much of a buffer are you going to have to those property lines? And yes, I'm one of those property owners whose property backs exactly to that.
I understand that there is not a buffer required by the county manual. We're actually proposing one there. And when I showed that to the planning department staff, they said, you're doing residential against residential, you don't need a buffer there. And I said, well, I think the people there are going to want one. I think we're looking at roughly 30 feet right now from the property line between Idlewild and the back lots. And again, there's no buffer on the Idlewild lots, so we're proposing that entirely on the Jesuit property there.
Right, but you're saying maybe 30 feet?
Yes.
Okay. My second question, when we had this last meeting, I asked you if you had a copy of the report. where they took samples testing for toxic dumping, and you told me you did not have a copy of that report yet. In this year and a half, have you now got a copy of that report?
I haven't found any reports that talk about toxic dumping on this property.
Okay. But you had a crews back there all behind all those houses on Ottawa Drive digging.
We did soil tests, yes.
Okay. Well, I was told it was checking for toxic waste by the crew that was out there.
I'm skeptical of that, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Okay.
No, it was based on the number of units we're talking about, and it actually did it as if, I think the maximum number under the RS zone is 3.5 per acre, which is 530 houses or something. There was enough capacity in water and sewer for that number of houses. It wasn't based on the 1 or 2 acre, 115 house zoning that's there now. It was based on what we're proposing. So beyond the 440, there's even more capacity than that. That's not what we're asking for. Well, that's not our ultimate goal. They were just making sure there's capacity there. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll come back to you, ma'am, but gentlemen.
Okay, yeah. I mean, a lot of people have talked about the traffic and the traffic being so bad, and it's terrible. But you also have to consider that Melford has been approved for 2,000 homes. That's going to put 12,000 more cars on Route 3 and into the Bowie neighborhoods a day. 12,000 a day. Plus we've got Marketplace, which has all been approved. How many hundreds is that going to put on those roads? And so, you know, that adds to the traffic situation.
I have two questions, and I'm not quite sure of my facts on the first one. Back in the 90s, if I remember correctly, there was a master plan, and somewhere in that it said, if you look out from the chapel up on the hill at Sacred Heart, you should not see any development, anything that could be different from what they saw in the 1700s when it was built. Okay, if you're up there right now, you might hear a little traffic. You don't hear a whole lot, but you don't see anything. Why did that change? Okay, that will change when you put all this in. Okay.
That's why we're proposing a buffer that's a lot wider than required by the manual. But
I know,
also,
but even with the
Sacred
buffer,
Heart wasn't there in the 1700s, but you can
the
see that from
chapel
the chapel.
was there. It is from the chapel is what I'm talking about. Okay, and the other thing about the buffers is we have a grotto, a sacred grotto back in the back of the property. How far is the buffer on that part? I mean, you talk about the ones on either side. The back of the property has the grotto.
The grotto is roughly, this is the ball field, and the grotto's at the south side of that ball field.
Right.
So that distance, I'm only estimating here, but 500 feet, it's hard to say from here, but we're not proposing, we're not going to develop all the way in the back corner here either.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. You could build right now because you could build RE houses with septic.
Yes,
So
you
why
could-
don't you do that?
We think there's more value. We think this is we think this is smart growth to, again, build this neighborhood around the existing infrastructure rather than building
We don't
further out.
consider it smart growth, and we were sleeping dogs, but we're awake now. Thank you.
In a pink sweater?
I really appreciate your coming here and talking to us like this, and I know that what we're doing to you is really not nice.
No, I
But I do,
respect your input.
my question is though, is that this is like, I'm starting to go to hearings like this more often in Bowie. And I'm beginning to think that what we are doing here right now tonight, does this have any effect at all? Or have all the plans already been made by the county? And what we're doing here tonight is wasting my time?
I hope not. Your elected officials are here. They're listening to you. I'm here. I'm trying to listen. Nothing's been decided. I'm looking for your input. I asked what folks thought about age restricted on the property, for instance. And let me say, when you said folks aren't being nice, I think, this could be a lot worse. People aren't interrupting each other. Nobody's screaming and yelling. This is a respectful audience. Bowie's a nice place. That's why people want to live here. And honestly, that's why we want to develop here. And civic engagement is one thing that makes a place where people want to live. So the fact that you guys come out on a Tuesday night when you don't have to, this isn't, nobody's voting tonight. It's not a hearing. Again, I appreciate the elected officials showing up and listening, but yeah, we're listening, and that's why we've been working on this for a couple years and coming back with ideas on what we can do to bring additional things to the community, like try and get 450 done, try and add that buffer around Sacred Heart. We're trying to find out if there's a middle ground that we can get to, that we can get city council, county council, planning board support for this project. So that it's a long process, but that's why we're working and that's why we're engaging. And again, I don't think you're wasting your time here tonight. I honestly appreciate every comment that we've had.
I respectfully disagree with what you just said as far as we as a group coming out because we're going to change things. We've tried that with Melford, which has got nothing to do with you. The rooms were packed to the rafters. We protested. We didn't want this. We didn't want that. As much as Geraldine tried, her master plan that she wanted to change did not change. So I believe we probably would have had more people here had we not all, a lot of us thought it's a waste of time because things are done and it's going to happen. Whether we as a group say yes or no, we're done, is my feeling. And that's a personal feeling. I don't know if anybody else thinks the same way, but there's my 2 cents.
Yes, sir.
I might have missed it, but if everything goes according to plan, no interruptions, when will you exactly start building the property? When will building begin? If everything goes according to your plan?
My plan has stretched out since we first met with you in 2016. There's at least a couple more years worth of going through approval processes. After a rezoning, after a rezoning to RS, it would go through a comprehensive comp plan and a preliminary plan, and then it goes to a detailed site plan. There'd be several more applications and rounds of hearings that would take a couple years even if we had the county and the city hearing next month on this rezoning, which we don't. So again, we're working, we're trying to find compromises and things we can do to improve our offering, but it's at least a couple years before we're breaking ground out there, even if we go today with no obstacles.
That's assuming the roads are improved, the water and sewer and all of that is all established.
Yes.
Right. So it could be from now a couple of years before they start.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
My turn.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, when we were fighting the maglev train, people felt the same way. Why are we here? It won't make any difference. It's going to go through our homes. And we beat that, okay? And I reminded people about Valley Forge and what the Patriots went through and George Washington. And he could have said, you know, why are we going through this? The British are going to win anyway. But you know, they didn't go home. They kept trying and they won. We can do the same thing.
Oh, pink sweater?
You know, Sacred Heart property is our last vestige of a beautiful woods around this area. I really hate to see it go. My son, who is retiring, wants to leave this area because of all the building. He wants to go to a place where they have woods and a creek running through it and places to hike. We lose our last bit of trees. I think it's going to be a very sorry place for us to live.
We've got the room till 9 o'clock. I'm happy to stay. I'm happy to engage with folks one-on-one, either tonight or, again, my name and number are up there. I also appreciate that you guys have other things to do this evening, so I think that concludes it. Thank you very much for your time, and appreciate you coming.